I'm really excited to have you all here today with me, and let's get started. So, I am the Amazon best-selling author of the workbook Finding Peace, which is really based on attachment, an attachment approach. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how that applies to the sex addict. But as I was thinking about it, even just sitting here, these same attachment issues are definitely part of the partner as well. And so as we're going through these different discussions, as we're talking about it today, I'll be talking specifically about the addict, but you can totally keep in mind that this really also applies to the partner as well. So I'm really excited to have all of you here with me today, and I'm looking forward to spending about an hour with you today. So the premise that I always start out with people is that there's a yin and yang between pain and peace. And most of us really want to have more peace in our lives and less pain. And part of the struggle in life is trying to figure out, how do we get more peace in our life and less pain in our life? And when I introduce the word peace to people, I will often ask them, okay, what other words do you associate with peace? And I'll hear words like bliss, serenity, calm, love, joy. And then I'll say, well, how many of you have so much peace in your life that you just don't have any room for much more? And I rarely have anybody raise their hand and say, yes, I have so much peace in my life, I don't need any more. I have had one or two, but for the most of us, we live in this dichotomy of we want more peace and yet we have pain. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there is a lot of pain. And so part of the process of finding peace is figuring out, how do we find peace amid the pain? So one of the things that has caused most of us some significant amount of pain are what I call attachment wounds. And I've identified that there are 6 different attachment wounds. The first is loss. And loss comes from just a part of life when we have a grandparent or a parent or a friend who maybe passes away, or our best friend moved across the country, or we end up getting diabetes or having a medical issue, and that creates some loss in our life. It's not that anybody did it intentionally to us. Nobody tried to inflict that kind of pain on us, and yet it is still very painful. And so that can be one of the attachment wounds that we may have. The second is neglect. And in neglect, there is the Child Protective Services version of neglect, which is the parents are not providing food, shelter, not changing the diapers, not really paying in much attention to the kid, and the kid is walking around at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. No one's paying attention to them. That's a pretty severe form of neglect. And on the other side of the spectrum, it's a child is at home and they're trying to get their mom or dad's attention, but mom or dad is too busy on Facebook or social media or watching TV. And so even though the parent or the caregiver is in the same house, they are not providing the time and attention that that child needs. And so that can create a neglect wound for the individual feeling. And I'll talk more about what happens with that. Rejection is basically exactly what it sounds like, when somebody flat out gives you the message that they don't like you. They think there's something wrong with you. They don't pick you for the team. They push you away. So that's the attachment wound of rejection. Abandonment is when somebody that you were close to, somebody that you felt you had a relationship with, just walks out of your life. They don't give any reason for why they left. They just stop talking to you, and they ignore you, and it's like there's this mystery of, why did you leave? I don't understand why you leave. Betrayal is when you have a relationship of trust with somebody, and then that person has violated your trust. They've lied to you, they've cheated on you, they've broken promises to you, and so that can create another form of an attachment wound. And then the last is abuse, and that can be sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. To me, abuse is kind of the combination of the other 5, but oftentimes there's some kind of physical Yes, verbal abuse too. There's some kind of physical threat. So abuse is I am taking my woundedness out on somebody else. So most of us have at least one of these wounds, and some of us have more than one of these wounds. And when they're created, oftentimes they're created when we're children. Many of you may be familiar with the ACEs screening, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. This fits right along with that. I've also understood, though, and I've experienced as I've worked with people, that sometimes these wounds aren't created until we're adults. And so it doesn't really matter where or when the wound was created, as much as there's an acknowledgement that you do have a wound. And that wound these wounds can be really, really painful. And unlike physical wounds, these wounds don't heal without treatment. Oftentimes a physical wound will automatically kind of heal itself. You accidentally burn yourself, and over a course of a week or two, it will automatically heal itself. But with attachment wounds, they don't heal. And in fact, they can lay dormant, and they can become infected, and they can cause intense pain that can create a lot of challenges for somebody in their life. I use the analogy sometimes that these attachment wounds are like a sunburn. You go to the beach, you forgot to put sunblock on, and you get burnt. But then you have to go back to life. You have to go back to work or school or whatever. You still have a life to live. And so you gingerly put on your clothes and you go back to work. And you just hope that nobody's going to come up and touch you, because and it seems like there's this radar. Everybody knows that you have a sunburn. And so they come up and they pat you on the back and they say, hey, buddy. And immediately they just smacked that wound. And that's what attachment wounds are like. You can function, you can go through your life, you can do your day-to-day activities, but there are moments when somebody may say or do something, and it's kind of like they came up and they just smacked that wound, and that creates a ton of pain for us. And if we don't figure out a way to heal that wound, it's just going to continue to perpetuate that pain. What happens is that when these wounds are created, and oftentimes they are created when we're children, we don't quite understand why they were happening to us. We may not even be aware that they are happening to us, but we try to make sense of why we were abandoned, rejected, betrayed. We try to make sense of all of that. And what we end up coming up with are some messages that we end up accepting as true that are core beliefs. And those core beliefs are what we then use as an explanation as to why these bad things have happened to us. And there's three genres of core beliefs. The first is an I am genre. And when we're talking about negative core beliefs, that is usually there's something wrong with me. I'm bad. I'm no good. I'm flawed and defective. I'm fat. I'm too skinny. I'm too much of this. I'm not enough of that. But that's a negative core belief that we end up tattooing on our heart that says whenever that rejection wound gets stirred up, or that abandonment or betrayal or those attachment wounds get stirred up, that message of there must be something wrong with me. That's why these bad things have happened to me. That gets inscribed in our heart. Another one of the genres of core belief is trust. And what we mean by that is I can't trust other people. The world is not safe. I can't lean on or depend on other people to get my needs met. And so I can't be vulnerable. That's what that core belief really perpetuates, is the sense of there's nobody there for me, so I'm alone, can't trust anybody. And then the third core belief is a sense of powerlessness. There's a sense of there's nothing I can do. So it becomes a very amazing trifecta of negative core beliefs, because if I believe that there's something wrong with me, and I believe that there's nobody that I can turn to for support or help, that leaves me really in a tight spot where I feel like, well, I'm not good enough and there's nobody around for me to be able to lean on. So I'm stuck, I'm powerless. And so it builds on each other. These three negative core beliefs, these genres of negative core beliefs build on each other. So the moment that the wound is touched, bumped up against, triggered, these negative core beliefs get activated almost simultaneously. And then we begin to feel some feelings of anger, fear, or sadness. Anger is a sense that something's been taken away from me without my permission. I didn't give permission for this thing to happen to me. I'm angry about that. Fear is a sense that something bad is going to happen to me and I'm powerless to do anything about it. It's going to be horrible and I can't stop it. And sadness, it comes from a sense that I've lost something and it's not coming back. It's not going to come back in the same condition. So those are three of the core beliefs that are out there. It depends on which therapist you talk to, but some therapists believe there's 8 core beliefs. And if you watched Disney's Pixar's Inside Out, they have 5 core beliefs. These are the 3 that I'm focusing on in this part of the model, is the anger, the fear, and the sadness, because we typically will experience those 3 emotions pretty commonly. But what happens is we live in a world really where we're not allowed to express anger. There's something wrong if we express anger. We shouldn't let anybody know that we're afraid. And so, or we shouldn't let anyone know that we're sad. We need to suck it up and make sure that everything's okay. And so the moment that we start to push down our emotions and not give ourselves permission to feel them, shame shows up in our life. And shame is like this deep fog that settles down and like sneaks into the corners and like covers everything. And the shame is, Brene Brown defines shame as a deep and abiding belief and experience that I'm flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So this ignition of a pain being activated, and then those core beliefs that there's something wrong with me, and then I'm angry or sad, but I can't do anything about it. All of a sudden, I just feel like, this is way too much, and I'm just, there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I can't handle it. That happens probably within nanoseconds of the pain being stirred up. There's a strong correlation between trauma, these attachment wounds, and addiction later in life, because what we've learned is that addiction is a really powerful way of numbing this pain. The shame, the anger, the pain, the negative core beliefs, that's all incredibly painful. And so we find some ways to numb, and there's thousands of ways of numbing. We all have probably some of our favorite ways of numbing. Chocolate is one of mine, but that we find a way to numb as a way of trying to shut all of this down because this is so overwhelming. And so we feel shame, so then we numb. And then we feel more shame, and so we numb some more. And that becomes that repetitive addictive cycle that Patrick Carnes introduced. It starts out with pain. We're feeling this pain, and then we move into preoccupation. We move into this sense of, I got to figure out a way to shut this down. This feels really, I don't even like it. And we may not even be conscious really of what's going on. We just know that something doesn't feel good and I don't like it. And so we immediately go into preoccupation, finding a way, what can we do to numb this? What can I do? Start surfing, looking online, checking people out. What can we do to start do that? And then we move into that ritual phase of engaging in the same types of behaviors that we usually always do, looking around the house, making sure everyone's asleep before we get on the internet. I'm getting onto the social media dating sites and start flipping through to see who might be a person that we could hook up with, whatever the rituals happen to be. And then we eventually act out, going back to our compulsive sexual behaviors, which then leads us back to the top of pain. In fact, we end up reopening those attachment wounds ourselves. So I'm rejecting myself, I'm neglecting myself, I'm abusing myself by doing these acting out behaviors. And so the cycle just starts over and over again. So we end up back in pain and we go around and around. What I believe is that acting out is our attempt to try and get our needs met. So there are needs associated with loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse. There are needs that are associated with those wounds. And we have stumbled upon some pretty unhealthy ways. The addict has stumbled upon some pretty unhealthy ways of trying to get those needs met that don't actually work. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to accomplish getting some needs met, and it doesn't work. So we have these loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment. That leads us into what Patrick Carnes has identified. There's 10 types of sex addiction. And when I'm working with the individuals that are struggling with sex addiction, I'll often explore their sexual template, their arousal template. What is it that causes them to be aroused? And inevitably, I can find there's a connection with one of these wounds. And their arousal template is their attempt to try and get one of these wounds healed by being attracted to whatever it is that's causing them the arousal. And I've been able to make the connection that it's connected to one of these one of these attachment wounds. And if we can figure out which attachment wound is really causing them pain, and we can start to identify what some of the needs are associated with that, we can start to help them identify some healthier ways to get those needs met besides engaging in one of these 10 types of sex addiction that Patrick Carnes identified. These negative core beliefs perpetuate us going into these different types of sexual behaviors, because if I believe that I'm not enough and I can't trust anybody to meet my needs and there's nothing I can do to ease the pain, well, then I can go right back into fantasy. I can do that, or I can go into anonymous sex, or whatever that happens to be. When that happens, when they start engaging in those different numbing behaviors, they end up not feeling better, they end up feeling worse. And so the last circle of this model is the mutated emotions. And I call them mutated emotions because anger mutates into jealousy, resentment, depression, anger turned towards myself, sadness mutates into depression, apathy, bitterness, fear mutates into anxiety. And so it changes, it becomes darker and deeper and more complicated. And that's usually when the client shows up and says, I'm tired of feeling like this. I don't want to feel like this anymore. Or the partner is saying, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Or my spouse, my partner's is really depressed and I don't want to keep living like that. That's usually when people show up and say, I need some help with this. So when they come in, then we got to figure out, well, how do we get back to peace? We want to take off these layers and we want them to get back to peace. And so the first thing we need to do is to provide them some tools to help stopping the numbing. And that's what a lot of the addiction programs are that are out there. That's what CSAT is all about. That's what sex addiction therapists are all trying to do. We're trying to help you develop some tools to help you stop the numbing. So that's the first step. If we can't stop the numbing, then we're not going to be able to get to the deeper, more important issues of the attachment wounds and trying to heal them. So we spend a lot of time in the program that I run with LifeStar. We spend probably the first year of treatment with working with them on helping them develop some patterns of stopping acting out behaviors, reaching out for support, doing the 12 steps. We provide a lot of tools during that process before we even start to uncover the trauma work. Because what we've discovered is if I just immediately go to the trauma work and stir that up without them having these kind of tools, they're going to relapse. They're going to go back into the cycle again, and they're going to feel worse about themselves. So first, we want to make sure that they really have some solid tools to stop numbing. The other part of this, though, the shame is very much prevalent. And as you know, working with addicts and partners, there's a lot of shame that is part of this whole addiction. And so we want to find some ways to be able to address the shame. And that's what the power of going to groups and 12 steps are all about. We invite the person to come into treatment and to begin to reveal the parts of themselves that they have been hiding for a really long time. And we invite them to come in and they meet with other people and they hear other people's stories, and then they are able to say, wow, that person across the way, they look pretty normal. And I'm hearing their story. Maybe I'm not as screwed up as I thought I was. Maybe I actually belong. Maybe I'm not bad. And as we're starting to bring them in and address the shame and shining light on that shame, it starts to get smaller and smaller. And then we get to a point where we're able to start dealing with some of the more intense emotions of anger, fear, and sadness. One of the ways that I've helped figured out how to help people deal with shame is a technique that I've used, which is personification of the shame. And in my book, there's 6 different personifications of shame. I'm not going to talk about all 6. I'm going to talk about the 3 that really show up a lot with partners and with addicts themselves. And the first is the judge. And the judge is this voice in your head that tells you that you're not enough. So the judge amplifies what you already believe about yourself, that negative core belief, that you're not good enough, that you're flawed and defective. And the judge is that voice that never stops talking and just says, well, you didn't try hard enough. Why did you do that? You should have tried harder. You're not perfect. What's wrong with you? You can't have any flaws. You can't have any imperfections. And the judge is just driving a need to be perfect, just driving it. And so the technique that I have with people in my office with identifying who the judge is and what the judge looks like is I have them close their eyes. And I have them imagine that they're in a soundproof building, a soundproof room, and they're the tech. They're the guy or the woman who's on the side where they're recording. They're in an audio studio, and they're on the side where they're going to be recording whoever's speaking in the other room, except that they can't see who's in the other room. The lights are out, and the other person is in a soundproof box, so you can't see them, but you can hear what it is that they have to say. And so then I say, okay, tell me what kind of messages the judge says to you. What do you hear? And then the individual will start to list some of those judgmental things. I'm too fat. I didn't try hard enough. I'm a screw up. There's something wrong with me. I have them start to identify, okay, so those are some of the messages that the judge is telling you. Now, tell me what the judge sounds like. And at first they're a little bit confused about what I mean by that, but it's just like, tell me the quality of the voice. Is it a female voice? Is it a male voice? Is it loud? Is it soft? Is it harsh and scratchy? Is it soothing? And they'll start to identify some of the qualities of the sound of that voice. And I'll say, okay, so now you've started to identify that's what the judge sounds like. How often do you hear the judge? And inevitably, most people will tell me, I hear the judge all the time. It never shuts up. Oh my gosh. I never even recognized that it was there, but it's like following me around and poking me on the shoulder all the time. It's always telling me that I'm not good enough. Like, great. Now let's turn on the light. Let's turn on the light so you can actually see what that voice looks like. And so they'll turn on the light and then they'll describe what the voice looks like. And the descriptions of the judge vary based on whoever it is, but it's typically a figure that's very mean, has their finger pointed out, just wagging their finger and pointing out that they're not enough. And then I say, okay, so now you just identified what the judge looks like, and you've identified what the judge sounds like. Let's put that judge over on the chair across the room. And I just want you to have them sit there for a minute. And I just want you to acknowledge that it's there and tell me what comes up for you as you see the judge. And then they'll be able to process, so I'm really angry about that. I'm really angry about what the judge is doing to me. I don't like it. And what we've just done is we've been able to take shame, turn it into a figure, and put it across the room so we actually can do something with it. We can now have a dialogue with it. We can talk to the judge and we can say, you know, I don't actually believe what you have to say. Or one of the powerful tools that we use is just to say to the judge, I see you. I see you sitting over there. And wow, that gives the client an enormous sense of power. Like, yeah, I can see you. And what I've discovered as we do this exercise is that the moment that I point out the judge and say, I see you, the judge stops talking. The judge is a part of shame. Shame doesn't like to be seen. Shame likes to hide in the dark. And so the moment I call the judge out and I say, I see you, I hear you, the judge is like, whoa, and stops talking. And now we have a reprieve for a little bit. And we can start to say, okay, what do you want to do with this silence? And we can do some powerful work with that. So that's the exercise. Usually the judge is the shadow of shame I start out with, because that one seems to be the loudest and most obnoxious for most people. So we work with that. The second shadow of shame that we work with is the impotent one. And the impotent one is the voice that tells you that you're powerless, that you can't, that you're never going to get any better, that your life is never going to change. I don't know why you're even trying. You should just accept the fact that it's never going to be better. And so it's very much a sense of a victim, very much a victim. And so the judge and the impotent one will tag team each other. The judge will say, man, you suck. You're horrible. I can't believe that you don't try harder. And then the impotent one will say, yeah, but you're never going to get any better, so I don't even know why you try. So we do the same exercise with the impotent one as we do with the judge. We have them imagine what the impotent one looks like, have them identify, wow, that one's not very fun to have around with me either. And we begin to identify them so we have power over them. The last of the shadows of shame I want to talk about today is the rebel. The rebel is very much the voice of the addict. Forrest Benedict, in his book, The Life After Lust, he talks about the evil genius, and this is very much the same kind of concept. The rebel is the shadow of shame that says, you should just do what you want. Who cares that it hurts anybody else? Who cares that it caused pain and disruption in other people's lives? You need to be able to do whatever it is that you want so that you can feel better about yourself, so you can numb this pain in a different way. So the rebel is very much that voice of the addiction. So when we're stuck in that sense of shame, sometimes the rebel is the one who says, well, let me pull you out. Let me get you to go back and act out again. And the rebel entices you to go around the cycle, the addiction cycle, and starts to preoccupy yourself, and then gets you to go back into the rituals, and then gets you to act out. That rebel is that part. And so we do the same thing with the rebel as we do with the other shadows of shame, and we begin to identify, okay, when does the rebel show up in your life? When does the impotent one show up in your life? When does the judge show up in your life? And we start to identify these shadows of shame so we can have some power over each of these shadows, and we can do something with them. As we start to identify these shadows of shame and start to enhance our own ability to dialogue with them, we can then help them start to work with their core emotions of fear, sadness, and anger. We want to help them transform those emotions, not to mutated emotions, but we actually want to help them transform them to more healing experiences. So for me, the opposite of fear is faith. Fear is a sense that something bad is going to happen and I'm powerless to stop it. But if I can identify what it is that I'm afraid of, now I can step into the fear. I can step into that fear and start to practice faith. And faith can be very spiritual or religious, and that can definitely be a component for a person who maybe is faith-based, but they don't have to be faith-based to do this. The faith is a sense that even though something bad may happen, I'm going to be okay. And so I'm going to step into that fear. I'm going to exercise faith, and I'm going to reach out. I'm going to ask for getting my needs met. And it may not happen, it may not work out, but I'm going to try. And that's what faith is. So we help them experience and express their fear, and then step into a sense of faith. Like, I'm going to reach out and ask for help. Sadness, again, is a sense that I've lost something, and I'm not going to, it's not ever going to be okay. I'm never going to get it back. It's gone forever. And the opposite of sadness for me is hope. That, yes, I have lost some things. I have to admit that I have lost some things, but I'm going to be okay. Life is I can still find joy. I can still find peace. There's hope that I'm going to be able to have connection. And so as we allow them to express their sadness and feel that, what we're hoping that they will do is be able to transfer that into a sense of hope. Like, it's not all going to be horrible for the rest of their life. And then anger, the sense that something's been taken away from me without my permission, we want to transfer that into a sense of love. I don't need to carry around anger and resentment all the time. I can express, yes, I'm angry that this thing happened and I didn't say that it was okay. And now I can learn how to let that go, and I can learn how to be more loving with myself. I can learn how to be more loving with the other people. And so in this phase of the treatment, that's really what we're working with, is helping them transform those emotions from fear, anger, and sadness into faith, hope, and love. When we help them lean into their discomfort of helping, so I'm trying to read what I'm writing. I got stuff in front of my face. We help them lean into the discomfort of asking for their needs to be met in a healthier way. So we go back to those wounds of loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, and betrayal. And I said earlier that each one of those has a need associated with it. So let me go over what those needs are. The first is the need that goes with loss is a sense of assurance. So if my wound is loss, what I really need is a sense that it's going to be okay, that I'm not alone, that there's a sense of assurance. So if my loss wound has been stirred up, what I need to be able to figure out how to do is go get some assurance. Instead of turning to porn or acting out, can I turn to somebody else? And can I be vulnerable and say, man, I'm really missing my dad who died. I'm really missing him. I just really could use a hug right now. I just need someone to tell me that it's going to be okay. Who could I turn to for that assurance? And how can I get that need met? Neglect, the need associated with neglect is attention. If people have been neglecting me, then I need someone to pay attention to me. So how am I going to go get that need met? I can definitely turn to my addiction, and that will always give me the attention that I need. Or I could figure out a healthier way to get that need met, and I go find somebody who can give me some attention. I could go to a 12-step meeting. I could call a friend. I could say, hey, can you just listen to me for a while? Whatever that is. But the neglect wound just got activated. What do I need? I need attention. The need associated with rejection is acceptance. I need to know that I'm loved. I need to know that you find that I have some value. I need to know that you want to be with me, that you're not pushing me away. Again, where can I go get that? I got to go figure out how to get that need met. The need for abandonment is presence. So if people have walked out of my life, what I really need is to have somebody just be there. We don't even have to talk. We don't even have to do anything. Just be with me. Just be there with me. And the need associated with betrayal is trust. So if you violated my trust, I'm going to need to have some people in my life that I can trust. With the partner who's spouse or a partner is the one who's been lying and cheating and all of those things, definitely there's definitely a betrayal there. In order for that relationship to heal, the partner is going to need to have some trust. So the addict is going to have to behave in a way that restores trust in order to get that need met. While that process takes a long time, the partner also needs to maybe have some other people in their life that they can turn to have trust. And sometimes that could be going to a spouse's support group or a spouse's therapy group where they are able to lean on some other people, family members also. And the need that comes with abuse is compassion. I just need you to be kind to me. I need you to treat me with respect. I need you to help me feel, I need to just have somebody treat me like I'm a person. Justin asked about about enmeshment, balance with sovereign space, firm boundaries. Yes, that would be a part of that. So, you know, as we're looking at these attachment wounds, sometimes enmeshment, and that's our unhealthy way of also trying to get these needs met, and that gets us back into those places of numbing. And so as we're looking at what our needs met, I'm gonna need to find healthy places to get these needs met. That definitely means that I'm gonna need to have some boundaries for myself. Boundaries come easier when I already believe that I'm worthy of love and belonging. But sometimes when I don't believe that I'm worthy of love and belonging, it's harder for me to establish those boundaries. So I learn how to do that with some healthy people first, and then try to apply those in more of the toxic relationships that we maybe are experiencing in our lives. As we start to learn how to get those needs met, we are also learning how to rewrite the negative core messages. Instead of believing that I am messed up, there's something wrong with me, I can't lean on other people to be there for me, I'm powerless. Every time we reach out and try to get one of those needs met and it works in a healthy way, we've just rewritten that negative message. We've been able to say, well, actually, I am worthy of love and belonging. Actually, there are people in my life that I can lean on for support. There are people that I can trust. I'm not powerless. There are things that I can do. And we start to rewrite those negative messages into powerful, positive messages. I am enough. I can trust others. I am powerful. I have choices. I can do what I need to do. And as we do that, we begin to step into that sense of peace. We learn that the way to heal pain is not acting out, but through reaching out for healthy connection that reassures us that we are enough now as we are. Shannon was asking if feeling attractive is one of those needs. Absolutely. That goes with the rejection wound. So if I'm not feeling attractive, I'm probably having a rejection wound that's going on. And so I'm just needing someone to tell me they like me. I'm needing to know that that I have value. That's the associated need with it. When you have a long-term relationship where it may be unreasonable for your partner to exhibit continual attraction and appreciation, I wonder how one could get this need met in a healthy way. Yeah, so one of the things we learn is that none of us are absolutely perfect, and all of us are flawed, and all of us have wounds. And so if I look at my partner and say, you're the only one in my life that is going to be able to help me meet all of my needs, whew, that's going to be really overwhelming, because the partner can't do that because they have their own wounds. So we figure out some other ways that are healthy to be able to get those needs met. So maybe we join a support group, or maybe we start a women's group, or we go to play dates, or we find other activities in the community. We develop relationships with other people so that we can find healthy ways to get those needs met that is not cheating on or betraying our loved one, but yet gets us to be able to get those needs met. I have a buddy in Phoenix who does that really well. Sometimes when he's really needing some assurance, he'll call me up and he'll say, Troy, I just feel like I'm a crappy dad right now. And even though I've turned to my wife and said, am I a good dad? And she said yes, I just need to hear it from somebody else. Can you tell me that I'm a good dad? And I'm like, yes, Matt, you are absolutely a good dad. And he's so vulnerable in that moment, and he's learning how to get his needs met. And so that's a powerful example. Heidi's asking if there is a direct correlation between the severity of the sex addict's wounds and the partners. Do they run in parallel? I don't have studies to back that up, but I would say yes. The deeper the wounds are for the sex addict and the less healing that has happened with those wounds themselves, the more they're going to act out in unhealthy ways of trying to get those needs met. And in that process, they are creating wounds for the partner, rejection wounds, betrayal wounds, neglect wounds. They are creating all of those wounds in the partner. And so the wounds for the partner, they're like fresh. They didn't know that that's what they signed up for when they got into this relationship. And yet now they are having some intense, painful attachment wounds that have just been created. And so we're trying to help the addicts stop acting out so they don't continue to perpetuate the wounds in the partner. We also have to help the partner not take responsibility and own the negative core beliefs that it's their fault, that there's something wrong with them, that they actually are enough, and that their addict partner's behaviors are not a reflection of their own core identity. Laura is asking if you feel your relationship is, let me go out. If you feel your relationship is toxic and re-traumatizing prior wounds, where you draw the line to try and repair the wounds and remain in partnership, and what are the signs you should decide to continue life on a separate path? It really goes, to answer that, it's really going down to how much do I still believe those negative core messages that I am not enough, that there's something wrong with me, I can't trust other people, and I'm powerless. If the other person continues to engage in toxic behaviors, but I have come to the belief that I am enough, that there is something that I can do, I become much clearer. It becomes much clearer for me to make the healthy choices that I need to make that says maybe this relationship needs to end. Because I've been able to embrace the peace in myself that I'm enough. And so it really goes down to that sense of rewriting those negative core beliefs for ourselves and helping us tap into the sense that I am enough. Forrest is asking, can we meet some of our own needs like attention, or do we need others to meet them? That's an excellent question, Forrest. Sometimes we can meet our own needs. We can do self-care. We can practice self-compassion. That's a huge component of this whole healing process. Let's practice some self-compassion. Let's be kind to ourselves. And sometimes in practicing self-compassion, we realize, yeah, I also need to get some loving from somebody else. I use an analogy of the love and belonging tank. And the love and belonging tank, when it's full, we feel loved, we feel valued, we feel affirmed, we feel good. And if it's empty, then we feel rejected, abandoned, neglected, betrayed, all of the attachment wounds. It's empty. But the love and belonging tank is like a gas tank for a car. If you're using your vehicle, you're always going to be consuming the fuel. And so you're always going to need to stop at the gas station and get more fuel. You always are. That's just part of life. It never stays full. It's always being used up. Yes, I will do that, Polly. So just like your car, you're going to need to go get it full. You're going to need to stop at the gas tank and get it filled up again. The love and belonging tank has a cap on it. The gas cap on your car, the gas cap in our own sense of our love and belonging tank is shame. So if I go to the gas tank, if I go to the gas station and I buy fuel, but I don't take the gas cap off, and I just stand there and I start pumping out the gas, but I haven't taken the gas cap off, it's going to go all over the floor. It's going to go all over the ground. It's not going to go into the tank. That's what shame does. Shame says, well, I'm unworthy of love. I'm unworthy of affection. So I got to take the gas cap off so I can get some love in there. And I've learned that really shame is best conquered when we are interacting with other people, when we are getting love and connection from other people. Empathy and compassion are two very powerful tools. So can we do that for ourselves? Absolutely, we can. But it's also really nice to be able to reach out to somebody else and have them get that need met too. I will, Polly is asking if I can go back and put that quote in, so I'll leave with that in just a second. There we go. So prior to today, somebody asked some questions about when do I recommend doing couples therapy in relationship to disclosure and the impact process. I believe that it's a balance of when do we do couples therapy, but with emotionally focused therapy, you know the 3 A's. If there's addiction, if there's abuse, or if there's an affair going on, then they're not ready to do couples therapy. So if there's an active addiction still going on, if there is an active affair going on, or if there is active abuse going on, then they're not ready for couples therapy. And so I usually recommend couples therapy after the addict has had some solid sobriety under their belt, at least 6 months of solid sobriety, and they've started to be able to repair the trust in the relationship. That's usually when I recommend couples therapy. Until then, I'm working with the addict, or I'm working with the partner, and I'm encouraging them to do their own individual work. They need to have some healing for themselves before we can start to come back together as couples. Marlene is asking, if your partner pushes you back and forth over many years in running and they seem very anxious, eagerly angered, would it be a good guess that there's a sex addiction hiding? Maybe they have a sex addiction. They may have a different addiction. What it does tell me is that they have some attachment wounds that continue to be triggered and they're not dealing with them. And so they're probably finding a way to numb that through their different kinds of behaviors. And so let's see if we can figure out what some of those attachment wounds are and figure out how we can help heal some of those, and maybe those behaviors will stop. Second question, is there an ideal or recommended time period of sobriety? I think I answered that I recommend at least 6 months, preferably probably a year of solid recovery before we step into couples. They really need to be able to, the partner really needs to be able to have some sense that this is going to be good, and we're not going to do that yo-yo thing that we used to do. Because especially with emotionally focused couples therapy, we need to be able to trust that the other person is going to be there, be present, and be there to help us through all of those attachment wound issues. And if they're still in active addiction or haven't had some sobriety under their belt, it's just not going to happen. What ongoing individual maintenance treatment is recommended for addicts in recovery while EFT couples are in therapy? I still recommend that they continue to meet with their individual therapist on a regular basis. Maybe not weekly, but maybe monthly. I'm also recommending that they continue to go to their 12-step or other types of community support. They're doing their work. They're continuing to work a recovery program. That's huge for the partner to be able to see that their spouse is continuing to be serious about recovery. That conveys a huge sense of, okay, I can tell that your recovery is really important to you. That makes me feel safer. I can trust you a little bit better. What, if any, ongoing conversation do you recommend occurring between couples therapists and partners addiction treatment therapists? A lot. Ideally, if they are on the same office, that's wonderful. The therapists can talk to each other. But if they're not, I recommend that there is some conversation that's going back and forth between the different therapists, because we're doing three things at once. We're trying to help each of the individuals in the healing experience. Both of them have stuff, and we're trying to help heal the relationship. And so having that open dialogue between each other is going to have a huge impact in the overall recovery for those partners. So let me go back now and see what other people have asked. I think I answered that. Kathy asked, how do you reduce shame by interacting with another person? If it's your partner and they don't trust, they won't abandon you even though they've never abandoned you. How do you reduce shame by interacting with another person if it's your partner? And so again, with that person has these abandonment wounds are really, really intense. And so we're going to need to do probably some more intensive trauma treatment for that abandonment wound so that that's not so tender for that person. And then as that's starting to heal, then we can start to try and work that out as a couple. The shame is very much associated with the negative core belief that I'm not worthy of people sticking around. And that's probably come from some pretty deep past abandonment. So EMDR works really well in rewiring some of that negative core beliefs. Other kinds of somatic therapies may work, but we want to do some more abandonment work around that in order to reduce the shame so that healing can take place. How long does treatment usually last? So that's a great question. It really depends on the severity of the wounds and the numbing behavior. So when we're talking about sex addiction, it takes at least 2 years to rewire the brain to not continue to use the numbing strategies as a way of acting out and finding some other ways to do that that are more healthy. So it takes about 2 years to solidly change the brain that way. If they don't have an addiction, but they're just working through the attachment wounds, it really depends on the severity of the wounds, how long they've had them, how many times has it been repeated over the course of their life. So it's hard to say exactly. Marlene said, just checking, when you refer to wound attachments, was that what you described earlier, feeling unworthy, not getting attention, not feeling attractive? Yeah, so the wounds are loss, neglect, betrayal, abandonment, rejection, abuse. So whenever you get bumped, simultaneously the negative core beliefs get lit up. I'm unworthy, there's something wrong with me, and therefore I'm not beautiful. And so then we start to challenge those as we've discussed. Donald wants to know, how do you decide on inpatient versus outpatient? The way that I decide that is how severe are they acting out? How long are they able to go without acting out? If they're able to manage some of their acting out with, and even maybe a couple of days in sobriety here and there, then maybe they won't have to go to inpatient. But if the person continues to just relapse over and over and over again, they might need to go someplace where they can get some solid time of not acting out. So inpatient may be recommended for that. It depends on the severity of what's going on with them and how frequently they're acting out. Let's see. Okay. Colleen is wondering if we can get a copy of this PowerPoint. I'm sure we probably could. I know this is going to be recorded, but I can talk to Doug and figure out how we maybe could send that out. Corey is wondering, how do you know whether or not you're a sex addict and just someone who is dealing with pain with sex? That's a great question. So sexhelp.com has a free screening form that a client can go to, or anybody can go to, and they can take that test. And then they'll be able to see how they score compared to other addicts that are sex addicts. So that screening will at least give the person some idea of whether or not this is an addiction. My definition of an addiction is I'm engaging in a behavior or a substance that I'm using to numb pain that I can't seem to stop, even when my life becomes unmanageable and my life begins to fall apart. So yes, there are some people that will use sex as a way of numbing pain, but their life isn't falling apart. They're able to control it. It's just like with alcohol. Not everybody who drinks alcohol is an alcoholic, but the alcoholic is somebody who they engage in drinking and then they can't seem to stop, or they continue to run their car into a tree, or they continue to have problems. And so it's really the complexity of what are the consequences of your acting out, and is it causing you or other people pain? Regardless of whether or not they have an addiction, if they're numbing, then let's try to find a way to get that wound healed so they don't have to numb so much. Chelsea, should you heal your wounds by getting your needs met in a healthy way by reaching out to multiple people for different needs, or should you find one person to reach out to for all your needs, like a sponsor? So like I said earlier, one person does not have the ability to meet all your needs, even if they're your spouse. They just don't, because they have their own wounds too, and they're not perfect. And so they're not going to be able to get all of your needs met. Yes, it's wonderful to be able to turn to your spouse or your partner or a sponsor to get a lot of those needs met. But if I have the expectation that my spouse or partner is going to be the one who's going to meet all of my needs, oh my gosh, that's so much pressure for both me and my partner. So that's not going to work out very well for them. So I'd recommend you develop a community of support. All right. Are there any questions? So Polly was asking if I could go back and show you that slide with the tattoos. So there, I'll leave you with that. If there aren't any more questions, oh, is relapse a given? Teresa's asking if relapse is a given. No. No. I wouldn't believe in recovery if I didn't believe that a person could be sober. And so relapse is not a given. Relapse is part of recovery. So, we can shame ourselves if we end up relapsing, or we can use relapse as a learning experience and figure out, okay, what wounds were stirred up for me, and how did I not engage in self-care, and what could I do better? So it can be a learning experience, but relapse is not a given. There are addicts in this world who've been able to stay clean for 30, 40 years. So I believe that relapse is not a given, and that living in recovery is absolutely possible. Daniel, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to read your names. Daniel is asking, I recognize a loud rebel voice at times. Can you further explain how this could be related to shame? Yeah, so the rebel, so each one of those shadows holds onto the negative core belief that you're not enough, but they come at it a different way. So the judge says you're not enough because you're not perfect. The impotent one says you're not enough and there's nothing you can do about it. The rebel says you're not enough, so who gives a crap? You should just go do whatever you want to do. Yeah. So it's this sense of, yeah, well, you're not enough, but who cares? That's the way that the rebel shows up. The rebel says you don't need help. There's nothing you should do. Just go live your life. It was a quote from the person about shame that I was looking for. Thank you. Brene Brown, her quote about shame is defined as the deep and abiding experience that I'm flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Shame is a deep and abiding experience and emotion that I'm flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope that you found it helpful. And thank you for all the work you do in trying to lift and provide light to other people and help them find peace. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.